when AJ Styles made his shocking debut, when the Shield went to war, when Shane McMahon jumped from the top of the cell, when Chris Jericho started putting people on the list, when the brand split reignited a war between Raw and SmackDown, when Goldberg destroyed Brock Lesnar in 90 seconds. And these are just some of the moments that defined the unforgettable year of 2016. From a creative standpoint, 2016 was the year WWE finally felt exciting again for the first time in almost half a decade. The year delivered dream matches, surprise returns, and one man in particular would arrive from the independent scene and go on to dominate the main event. But what made 2016 so special? What were the feuds, the debuts, and the creative decisions that revitalized pro wrestling's momentum? Let's turn back the clock and revisit the greatest year in modern WWE history. Our story starts in January at the Royal Rumble. Heading into WrestleMania 32, WWE's top card was looking seriously bleak as stars like Cena, Rollins, and Orton were all out of action due to injury. Roman Reigns was defending his WWE Championship inside the Rumble match itself, battling the entire roster in one night. The crowd was hostile, the atmosphere tense, and when the countdown hit 0 for the number 3 entrant, everything changed. AJ Styles, the man who had defined TNA wrestling for over a decade, the man who had made his name all over the globe from New Japan to Ring of Honor, stepped onto a WWE pay-per-view stage for the first time in his career. At 38 years old, many wondered if Styles had missed his window. Vince had a reputation for burying talent he didn't create, and the company's track record with outsiders was mixed at best. But from the moment Styles locked eyes with Roman Reigns, it was clear something different was happening. Over the following weeks, Styles quickly aligned himself with Chris Jericho, forming an unlikely partnership that showcased his personality and in-ring brilliance. The two worked seamlessly together, trading victories and building chemistry until their friendship inevitably crumbled. At WrestleMania 32, Styles and Jericho collided in a match that, while solid, left fans worried. Styles lost clean, and the whispers began about whether this was another case of Vince refusing to elevate an outsider. But those fears were quickly erased. Just one night after WrestleMania, Styles won a fatal 4-way #1 contenders match, earning himself a shot at Roman Reigns' championship. Suddenly, the phenomenal one was in the main event picture. At Payback, Styles and Reigns delivered a hard-hitting encounter that proved Styles belonged at the top of the card. He lost, but the performance mattered more than the result. The rematch came at Extreme Rules, this time under no-holds-barred rules with the help of Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson looming. Once again, Reigns retained, but the matches had accomplished something crucial. They'd established Styles as a legit main event player in the WWE, and then came the feud that would define Styles' year. John Cena returned from shoulder surgery in June, and when he crossed paths with the Phenomenal One, the reaction was deafening. These were two men from completely different worlds. Cena, the PG superhero. Styles, the indie darling who had conquered every territory except this one. Styles mocked Cena's corporate image and questioned his passion for the business. Cena fired back, claiming Styles had spent his entire career in the minor leagues. At Money in the Bank, the two finally met in the ring, and Styles did the unthinkable. He beat John Cena. The win felt monumental. A passing of the torch moment that legitimized everything Styles had accomplished outside WWE. But more importantly, it proved that WWE was willing to invest in him. Following the brand split in July, Styles was drafted to SmackDown, and his rivalry with Cena continued at SummerSlam. Once again, Styles emerged victorious in what many considered the best match of the night. By the time the referee's hand hit the mat for 3, AJ Styles had cemented himself as one of WWE's top stars. But Styles wasn't finished. In September at Backlash, he defeated Dean Ambrose to capture the WWE Championship within 8 months of his debut. For the remainder of 2016, Styles carried SmackDown on his back, defending the title against Ambrose and Cena in a series of excellent matches that proved his reign was no fluke. What made Styles' 2016 run so remarkable wasn't just the speed of his ascent, it was the fact that WWE allowed him to be himself. The company didn't try to change his moveset, his personality, or his presentation. They trusted him, and he repaid that trust by delivering at every opportunity. By year's end, AJ had gone from an uncertain debut to WWE champion, proving that he was what he always claimed to be, simply phenomenal. But while Styles was conquering new territory, 3 former brothers were on a collision course that had been building since 2014. The Shield had been unstoppable. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose had dominated WWE as a unit before Rollins turned his back on his brothers, shattering the Brotherhood with a chair shot heard around the world. For 2 years, the three had traveled separate paths. Rollins became a corporate champion before injury took his title away. Reigns was pushed as the face of the company despite fan resistance. And Ambrose, the scrappy underdog, had clawed his way into relevance through sheer determination and charisma. At Extreme Rules, after Reigns retained his championship against Styles, the arena fell silent. Rollins made his return from his devastating knee injury and made his intentions clear immediately, laying out Reigns with a pedigree. The architect had returned, and he wanted what he'd never lost. What followed was a slow-burning build to the match everyone had been dreaming about since 2014. At Money in the Bank in June, Reigns and Rollins went to war in a near 30-minute classic that showcased their chemistry. Rollins won the title back, reclaiming what injury had stolen from him. But the celebration was short-lived. Dean Ambrose had won the Money in the Bank contract earlier that night, and as Rollins celebrated his hard-fought victory, the lunatic fringe struck Rollins with the briefcase, and in a moment of poetic justice, pinned the man who broke the Shield to become WWE champion. The tables had turned. The man who had been left for dead by Rollins in 2014 now stood tall with the gold. But the real story was what happened in those 10 minutes. All three Shield members had held the gold on the same night, and it meant one thing was now inevitable: the Shield triple threat. At Battleground in July, the three finally collided in the match the fans had been begging for. And when Ambrose scored the pinfall to retain his championship, it felt like the end of a chapter that had defined wrestling for over 3 years. And with the WWE Championship now heading to SmackDown with Ambrose, the landscape of the company was about to change forever. On July 19th, WWE pulled the trigger on an idea they hadn't touched in 5 years: the brand split. Raw and SmackDown would once again operate as separate entities with exclusive rosters, championships, and creative directions. The draft saw Stephanie McMahon and Mick Foley take control of Raw, selecting stars like Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, former NXT champion Finn, and Charlotte Flair. Meanwhile, Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan built SmackDown around Dean Ambrose, AJ Styles, John Cena, Bray Wyatt, and Randy Orton. The split immediately injected new life into the weekly television shows. For the first time in years, both shows mattered. SmackDown Live, rebranded with a new blue aesthetic, embraced its underdog status. The show was dubbed the Land of Opportunity, and they proved it by giving fresh matchups and overlooked talent a chance to shine. Styles dominated SmackDown as WWE champion, but the show's strength came from its depth. Heath Slater, who went undrafted, turned his desperation into comedy gold, begging for a contract on both brands before finally winning the SmackDown Tag Team Championships with Rhino. The Miz transformed the Intercontinental Championship into a prestigious prize, delivering promos that reminded everyone why he was one of the best talkers in the company. His rivalry with Dolph Ziggler at No Mercy saw Ziggler put his career on the line, and the match delivered an emotional classic that elevated both men. Meanwhile, Randy Orton's slow-burn descent into the Wyatt family provided SmackDown with a psychological thriller. Talking Smack, the post-show hosted by Daniel Bryan and Renee Young, became must-see as the unscripted promos created viral moments that sometimes overshadowed the main show itself. The Miz's infamous promo tearing into Daniel Bryan for calling him a coward became one of the most talked-about segments of the year. Raw, on the other hand, struggled with identity issues early on. The Demon King made his main roster debut and faced Seth Rollins for the inaugural Universal Championship at SummerSlam. The match was excellent, and Finn's victory felt like the dawn of a new era. But sadly, a shoulder injury during the match forced him to vacate the title the very next night. The Universal Championship eventually landed on Kevin Owens after Triple H turned on Seth Rollins. Owens' reign, while criticized by some, gave birth to one of the year's most entertaining dynamics: the friendship between Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho. The two became inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and creating comedy gold with the List of Jericho. What started as a gimmick with a clipboard and a pen became one of the most over acts in the company. The Red brand also reintroduced the Cruiserweight division, hoping to recapture the magic of the Cruiserweight Classic tournament that had aired earlier in the year. TJ Perkins became the inaugural champion, and stars like Rich Swann, Cedric Alexander, and Neville joined the roster. Unfortunately, the division struggled to connect with live crowds, often treated as a bathroom break rather than a showcase of athleticism. The women's division on Raw became defined by the rivalry between Sasha Banks and Charlotte Flair. The two exchanged the Raw Women's Championship multiple times throughout the year, even delivering the first ever Women's Hell in a Cell match in October. By the time Survivor Series arrived in November, both brands had established distinct identities. The pay-per-view was built around brand supremacy, with Raw and SmackDown going head-to-head in a series of matches. The men's traditional 5-on-5 match was chaotic, with SmackDown pulling off the victory. But the real shock came in the main event: Goldberg had returned to WWE after 12 years away, and his opponent was Brock Lesnar, the beast who had ended The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak. The build promised violence. Instead, it delivered stunned silence. In 86 seconds, Goldberg destroyed Lesnar with 2 spears and a jackhammer, ending the match before it truly began. The man who had dominated WWE for the last 2 years had been squashed in under 90 seconds. But while the main roster was experiencing its renaissance, WWE's developmental brand was having the best year in its history. NXT had already proven itself as a legit third brand by 2015, but 2016 was the year it truly became must-see. As stars like Finn, Sami, Owens, Bayley, and Sasha Banks graduated to the main roster, new faces arrived to fill the void, and NXT didn't miss a beat. On April 1st at TakeOver Dallas, the wrestling world witnessed something special. Shinsuke Nakamura, the king of strong style from New Japan Pro Wrestling, made his WWE debut against Sami Zayn in a match that is still replayed to this day. The entrance alone, with Nakamura's theatrical charisma, set the tone. When Nakamura hit the Kinshasa for the victory, it was clear NXT had just signed its next megastar. Bobby Roode debuted with his glorious entrance that became an instant phenomenon. Samoa Joe, already established as a monster, captured the NXT Championship and began a reign of terror that saw him become the brand's first 2-time world champion. The women's division, led by Asuka's seemingly unstoppable run, delivered classic after classic. But perhaps no match in 2016 better exemplified NXT's commitment to wrestling excellence than DIY versus The Revival at TakeOver Toronto. The 2 out of 3 Falls tag team match felt like it was pulled straight from the dream of a wrestling purist. Other stars like Austin Aries, Andrade, Ty Dillinger, and Sanity brought their own unique flavor to the delicious recipe of the Black and Gold brand. NXT in 2016 wasn't just about great matches, though. It was about purpose. Every storyline made sense. Every character had clear motivations. The shows were tight, efficient, and never wasted a moment. While the main roster sometimes stumbled with overproduced segments and questionable booking, NXT felt like pure wrestling. It was a reminder that sometimes less really is more. It's a shame that Triple H hasn't been able to replicate the same magic on the main roster. But in 2016, NXT had firmly established itself as more than just a developmental territory. It was a proving ground for the future, a haven for wrestling fans who craved quality, and a brand that could stand shoulder to shoulder with Raw and SmackDown in terms of importance. But beyond the headlines and championship reigns, 2016 was filled with moments that reminded fans why they loved wrestling in the first place. Shane McMahon came back after 7 years away and immediately threw himself off the Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania because, well, that's what Shane does. His partnership with Daniel Bryan as SmackDown's leadership became one of the year's most enjoyable dynamics. Enzo and Cass brought their infectious energy to Raw, Braun Strowman emerged from the Wyatt family's shadow and began his transformation into a monster. The New Day continued their record-breaking reign as tag team champions, Becky Lynch won the SmackDown Women's title, the Usos finally turned heel, and most importantly, wrestling felt fun again. It truly was a phenomenal year in WWE, and perhaps the best year for the company since 2008. And if you want to relive the wild year of 2008 in WWE, check out this video next.